welcome back to another episode of Murder, Mayhem, and Mystery spanning almost 100 years. We have an interesting program for you. I'm Carl Brookins. I'm a mystery writer. Over here is Ellen Hart, creator of Jane Lawless. Do you get hungry when you write those books about food?
Depends on what I'm writing about.
And on the other side of the table, Ken Kruger, who writes about northern Minnesota. And, you know, the fact is, this is parenthetical, but the fact is that I often think not of northern Minnesota, but of northern Wisconsin when I read your books. I don't know why that is, but I can see, it just feels like northern
Very
Wisconsin.
similar landscapes.
It's very true. That's very true. We have an interesting program for you. Not only are we going to talk about James Cain and The Postman Who Always Rings Twice, but we're going to talk to Robert Alexander, who is a current writer who writes some really interesting mystery and fiction about Russia and some very fascinating characters. But first, we're going to talk about James Cain and The Postman Always Rings Twice. And my question to you to sort of start this out, Ken, is what would you say is the single most significant aspect of this novel?
I'll answer that in a moment, but first I think we ought to give a brief synopsis of the story for those viewers who aren't familiar with it.
You want to do that?
I will do that. The Postman Always Rings Twice is set in Depression-era Southern California. It concerns a drifter, Frank Chambers, who gets a job working for a guy, a Greek named Nick Papadakis, who owns a burger and gas joint along the highway. Nick has an absolutely drop-dead gorgeous wife named Cora, and Cora and Frank fall for each other in a big way. The Greek, of course, is a complication, and they plot to get rid of him. They don't succeed the first time, but the second time they, in fact, kill him. And they're prosecuted for it. They slip the hangman's noose, only to find that unfortunate circumstance, or maybe it's the hand of God, gets them in the end.
So you think that the hand of God, in a sense, is active in this novel?
I wouldn't say that, but James M. Cain certainly made some comments to that effect. If I had to say what's the single most significant, I'm going to actually say two things, not just one. First of all, economy. This is one of the most economically told stories that I've ever read. Cain offers no adornment, and he just races the story along at breakneck speed. And the other thing is raw sexuality. For its time, this was really a racy book. In fact, it was considered so racy that it was banned in Boston and in Canada. Yeah.
But it was an instant success. Instant.
See, banning a book is a good thing to do for sales.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. That's it being banned may have helped its sales, but that is. I mean, it was a good book in any case. Why do you think it was such a success?
Well, I think the sexuality had a lot to do with it. The fact that it was short, it's about a third of the size of most novels, probably led people to pick it up, and it does. It never quits. Of the two novels, we read The Maltese Falcon, we read this one, and I really liked The Maltese Falcon. I really did not care for this one.
Really?
It's a very powerful novel, but it felt very flat to me, and I don't know if anybody else had that reaction.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I wasn't drawn into the story at all emotionally. I found it an intriguing and interesting study of these characters, their motivations, and ultimately the outcome of their actions, but I didn't care.
Wasn't part of the, but one of the problems of analyzing or thinking about these kinds of things, of course, is the fact that because we're all writers, we probably don't approach them in the same way that a reader does. Did you mention that this was published in 1934?
Yeah.
I think, okay.
Oh, I don't think I did.
No, that's
but it was published in 1934.
That's true, and that's an important aspect for people who may be watching who want to read the book. It seems to me that it's yes, explicit, much more explicit than a lot of books, even though the books are written today, particularly in the dialogue.
But I think to some extent we've let the two movies that have been filmed define the book for the modern readers.
I think you're right.
Something that you said that Nick, or the Greek, has this absolutely gorgeous wife. That's not the way it's written in the book.
In the book, right, that's right.
She's not particularly attractive, but she's got a great figure.
There's a sensuality about her, however.
Yes, absolutely.
Maybe not your classic beauty, but there's definitely a sensuality about her, and she talks about that too, the way men respond.
Right.
And she's very forward, particularly for the time. I mean, she initiates sex several times throughout the book with him, doesn't he? Doesn't she?
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Remember that right? But not in the movie so much, as I recall.
Well, but remember the movie. The movie was made at a time when
Garfield
the first movie, which was Garfield and Lana Turner,
Right.
And that was made at a time when the Hollywood code was such that they really had to tone down the sexuality in it.
Right.
The Nicholson version, which I have to admit I haven't seen, was apparently much more much rawer and much truer to the nature
Much
of the
more
book.
explicit.
The sex in the book is really violent sex.
It is.
There's a scene right at the very beginning, almost their first kiss. He bites her. Or does she bite his lips? One of them bites the other's lip
Yeah.
during the kiss,
I don't
and
remember
blood
that.
spurts out all over the
Right.
place. When I read this in my 20s, I thought, "Whoa, this is great."
Yeah, but it's probably tame today, but you have to look at it in the context in which it was written, and
Yeah.
I think it wasn't. But the thing is that impressed me about this book, that I liked, that also impressed me about Dashiell Hammett's The Maltese Falcon, is that there's no there's a lot of psychological complexity, but the main character is not taking things apart. He's
Right.
not thinking. He's just acting.
It's
He's
all
moving.
on the surface.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that makes that book move so fast. It's all story,
Except for the cat.
except for the
You
cat.
know, the cat there's a certain psychological, and that we sort of, sorry about that, but we sort of scratched the surface here, and there's a whole lot more to say about this seminal novel, but we'll be back in just a moment with our guest, Robert Alexander. Meanwhile, take a look at some of the topics we're going to be discussing as the series moves along.